The restaurant was loud, chaotic, and filled with the usual noise of a Saturday rush. But all of it faded the moment a terrified little girl spilled her drink and froze as the manager stormed toward her. Customers turned away, staff pretended not to see, and in the middle of the room, a young waitress with tired eyes and trembling hands felt something rise inside her, something stronger than fear. She stepped forward, placing herself between the furious manager and the frightened child without thinking of her job, her paycheck, or the consequences waiting at home. What she didn't know was that the girl's father, quietly watching from across the room, was a billionaire, and what he would do next would change her life forever. The storm outside had not yet touched the town, but inside the crowded restaurant, tension moved like a shadow waiting to strike. It was a late Saturday afternoon, the kind where people rushed into diners to escape the wind, gossip, or loneliness. And in the middle of all the noise, where plates clattered and orders were screamed across the counter, a moment was building, quiet, fragile, and destined to change several lives forever. A young waitress named Lena wiped her trembling hands on her apron as she prepared the next order, unaware that she was only seconds away from stepping into a fire she never asked for. A fire that would test her courage, her compassion, and ultimately reveal the very soul she carried inside her. On the other side of the room, hidden in an unassuming booth, a man watched everything carefully. He wore no suit, no hint of power, no sign of the empire he owned. But behind his calm eyes was a hurricane of worry. For sitting across from him was his daughter, Emily, a delicate and gentle girl with special needs who struggled with the world in ways most people never saw. When the trouble finally unfolded, it happened fast, brutal, and loud, and the billionaire, despite all his power, felt completely frozen, until he saw her step forward. If you believe in compassion, kindness, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. From the moment Lena started her shift that morning, she sensed something heavy in the air. Maybe it was the tiredness clinging to her bones after 3 double shifts in a row. Maybe it was the weight of unpaid bills folded like silent threats inside her locker. Or maybe it was simply the way life seemed determined to push her harder than most. She was 23, working 2 jobs and barely managing to survive. Her mother was bedridden at home, and her little brother depended on medicine they sometimes couldn't afford. Every night she fell asleep praying for a break, a miracle, or at least a single day without struggle. But miracles never came to people like her, or so she believed. She had seen the man and his daughter come in earlier, but she didn't recognize him. To her, he was just another tired parent trying to keep his child comfortable. Emily had difficulty sitting still, rocking slightly as she hummed to herself. Sometimes she flapped her hands when excited. Sometimes she covered her ears when loud noises overwhelmed her. Lena noticed these things, not with judgment, but with the quiet familiarity of someone whose life had taught her compassion. She smiled warmly whenever she passed their table, not wanting to intrude, but wanting the girl to feel seen in a world that often overlooked children like her. But not everyone shared the same heart. The restaurant's manager, Victor, was a man who carried his authority like a weapon. He barked orders, insulted staff, and treated customers like interruptions to his misery. He especially had no patience for anyone who didn't fit his idea of normal. So when Emily accidentally spilled her drink after becoming startled by a sudden burst of laughter from another table, Victor stormed over with the fury of a man looking for something to blame. Lena saw him walking toward the family, and her stomach dropped. She knew that look. She knew what he was about to do. And she felt helpless, until helplessness turned into something sharper, fiercer, something she didn't even recognize in herself. Victor leaned over the table and scolded Emily with a tone dripping in disgust. He complained loudly about making a scene, about customers leaving, about children like her needing control. He even grabbed the napkin dispenser roughly, causing Emily to flinch and pull back in fear. The billionaire, still unnoticed as a billionaire, tried to calm his daughter, but he was too gentle to confront the aggression. Emily covered her ears, her breathing quickening, her eyes filling with a panic so raw it pierced the room. And that was the moment Lena snapped. Before she realized she was moving, she marched across the floor and placed herself between Victor and the table like a shield. Her voice shook, but her conviction did not, as she told him that he was scaring the child, that Emily wasn't being difficult but overwhelmed, that he had no right to talk to customers, especially a vulnerable girl, with such cruelty. The entire restaurant fell silent as her words echoed through the room. Victor turned red with anger, calling her disrespectful, irresponsible, and unprofessional. He threatened to fire her on the spot, to blacklist her from every restaurant in town. But Lena didn't move. She stood firm, even though her hands trembled, even though her lungs burned, even though fear clawed at her ribs. For reasons she couldn't explain, protecting this one frightened girl mattered more than protecting the job that kept her family alive. Emily peeked out from behind her fat. She sank against the wall and tried to breathe, whispering prayers she wasn't even sure were being heard. The billionaire waited until Emily had calmed, then whispered to her that he would be right back. With slow, steady steps, he walked toward the kitchen, not as a man of wealth or power, but as a father whose heart had just been rescued by a stranger. He found Lena wiping tears from her face, staring at her apron as if it were the last thing holding her world together. She didn't hear him approach. She only felt someone standing nearby and quickly apologized before turning, only to freeze when she saw the kindness in his eyes. He thanked her with a sincerity that made her tears spill again. But she insisted she didn't do anything special, that she only did what any human being should do. The billionaire knew better. He had spent years watching people stare at his daughter as if she were an inconvenience. He had spent years silently begging the world to be gentle with her, and now here was this young woman, exhausted, overwhelmed, underpaid, and yet refusing to let cruelty win, even at her own expense. He asked her simple questions: how long she had been working there, whether she was okay, whether Victor often behaved that way. When Lena answered honestly, his heart tightened. He saw the exhaustion in her shoulders, the stress in her eyes, the sacrifices she carried silently. Then he asked her something unexpected. What did she want to do with her life? The question broke her. She had dreams once, big ones, studying nursing, helping people with special needs, making a difference. But life had forced her to bury them under bills, responsibilities, and survival. She whispered that dreams were luxuries people like her couldn't afford. The billionaire's expression changed, not into pity, but into determination. He returned to his table, paid quietly, and left with Emily. But he didn't leave the story. He went straight to his car, handed his driver a card, and instructed him to return to the restaurant with a message. Minutes later, right as Victor was preparing to fire Lena in front of the whole staff, a man in a suit walked in and asked for her by name. He handed her an envelope with a gold-embossed seal. Victor snatched it first, assuming it was a complaint, but when he opened it, his hands shook violently. It was a formal written notice purchasing the restaurant outright, signed by the billionaire himself. The letter stated clearly that effective immediately, Victor was terminated for misconduct and abuse of authority, and Lena was to be temporarily placed in charge of floor operations until further decisions were made. Victor stuttered, completely speechless, as the staff and customers watched in disbelief. Lena's knees nearly buckled. She couldn't understand any of it. She thought it was a mistake, a prank, something impossible. But the man in the suit simply smiled and told her that the new owner wanted to speak with her personally. Outside, the billionaire waited with Emily by the car. When Lena walked out, confused and shaking, Emily reached for her with a shy smile, recognizing the person who had stood up for her. The billionaire explained everything gently, telling Lena he couldn't ignore what she had done. He couldn't ignore the fire, the heart, or the courage. He told her he wanted to offer her a full scholarship to study whatever field she wished, including special needs care if she still held that dream. He also wanted to give her a stable income while she studied, ensuring her family never struggled again. Lena broke down completely. Her legs gave out and she knelt on the pavement, sobbing in disbelief as the billionaire helped her to her feet with kindness and respect. Emily hugged her tightly, sealing a bond that felt destined by something greater than chance. The next weeks changed everything. Lena returned to work, but now with pride, dignity, and support. The billionaire renovated the restaurant, turning it into an inclusive, family-friendly space with special accommodations for children like Emily. He made Lena the manager, not as charity, but because she had the heart leadership required. But he did more than change her life. He helped her rediscover her purpose. He paid for her mother's treatments, ensured her brother received all the medicine he needed, and gave Lena the one thing no one had ever offered her before: a chance. As months passed, she started college, studying with a passion fueled by gratitude and purpose. She visited Emily often, becoming like an aunt to her, a constant source of comfort and joy. The billionaire often said that Lena didn't just defend his daughter, she restored his faith in humanity. And Lena often whispered that he didn't just save her life, he gave it back to her. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us bring more real, emotional stories to life. Before the ending, please comment. Kindness can change.